Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order and to acknowledge that we are standing on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. We do have a late item for approval. That is the Comox First Nation Guardian Watchman Program under your correspondence. So I can get that moved and seconded.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, and then we do have an amendment to the agenda to reverse the order of items 10C and 10D. So, all in favor? Okay, that's great. And so motion to adopt the agenda as amended. All in favor? Great, thank you. That's carried. So we have two delegations. We have Frank Denton from the Comox Sailing Club. Good to see you, Frank. And we'll let you take the podium there. You'll have 10 minutes and then there'll be questions after. If you could, please, when you're talking, press the button, make sure it goes red. That way the folks on YouTube can hear. I'm okay with that. As long as you don't spit at Maureen and Ken. So. Press the button, make sure it's red.
Red, I pressed it, didn't press it hard enough. Sorry. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Frank Denton, and I've been treasurer of the Sailing Club since Pontius was a pilot. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Rob Douglas, who is also a director of the Sailing Club, and he's been really instrumental in driving and in the success of all our dinghy programs over the last few years. So I'm happy to have Rob here with me. I express some regrets on behalf of James Walkers, our Commodore. He's working, unfortunately, and not able to be here tonight. I don't want to reiterate everything that I put in the letter. That be boring for you. But I did want to make a couple of points, if I may. First of all, the growth of our sailing club over the last few years has been nothing but tremendous. 5 years ago, when we close to the start of our sailing school courses that we run, we had about 100 participants. And last year in 2021, we had just about 300. So the growth has really been quite exceptional. And this really has made the need for us to have an indoor training facility of our own really very pressing. Just as an example of this, in the spring of the year, we now run some courses which we call Sail and Kayak, Learn to Sail and Kayak, and they're directed to School District 71 classes. And for this year, we already have 14 days committed for School District 71 classes. If we had indoor training space that we could use when it was necessary for the weather, we could provide more of those classes because we could extend earlier in spring when the weather isn't so good. The bad weather isn't a problem for sailing, but it's really a problem for instruction on the dock. That's really miserable if it's really raining. If for the sailing, they're mostly wearing wetsuits and things, and it doesn't matter so much. If we had the training facility, we could also host a lot more provincial events. We do run a summer regatta already, which draws people from all over the province. If we had the space, we could considerably increase that. And most of the participants are young kids, really. So they arrive here with their families and do bring a lot of business to the valley. So it's a positive thing. I should mention that last year we did use the Spinnaker room for our training. And the town actually, we were using it every day, and the town very graciously gave us a little deal on it. That worked out, but it's really very much less than ideal for us because understandably we had to remove all our training materials every night and we couldn't leave any of our gear there. So really the need for our own space is really quite pressing. One other thing I just wanted to talk about a bit, in the letter to you, we do say that we could locate this facility, should you approve it, on either side of the RC SAR building. And we could live with it being on either side, if the town has a preference. The more convenient side, of course, would be closer to the boat ramp, but on the other hand, the space between the dock and the land is a little narrower there. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but the RCMC SAR building does go aground at low tide and assumes quite a bit of a tilt. The other side has got a little bit more room, but it's not really quite as convenient. So we could live with either. If the town has no preference, we would have to do a little bit of work to survey the area and see which would work best for us. So other than that, I have nothing else to say to you, and be very happy to answer some questions, or Rob, if they're appropriate for his area. Other than that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Frank. Do you have any questions from council? Councilor McGowan.
Hi, thanks. First of all, a question and a comment. First, a comment. My son went through the sailing training last year and absolutely loved it. And it was a wonderful experience. So I just wanted to pass that on to you guys that I think you guys are making a really nice big impact on these kids, teaching them the greatness about being out on the water and how fun and great that is. Just out of curiosity, how many little of those boats do you currently have, and are you going to expand your fleet if you?
We have, Rob, we have 4. Oh, I see. Sorry, we have 14 or so of the small boats, and we have 5 or 6 of the bigger boats, 420s and lasers. Right, Rob?
And there's 14 of the Opties, the ones that get under 12, and there's 7 lasers and 5 4 and then 8 double kayaks for.
Thanks. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Frank.
Thank you.
And you're welcome to stay the rest of the meeting, but it's probably going to be quite a while, so you're welcome to leave as well. So, Councillor Grant.
Just wondering, I know there's a letter later on about this, but at
Yeah.
what point would we action this item in some way?
Yeah, that's
come back at a later time.
It's under correspondence. I think the thought was to refer it to staff, get a bit of a report on this, what it would look like, and bring it back to us. So if you want to
Do you
move
want to
that
wait till
now.
correspond? I'm just wondering when the right, because that's what I was going to ask to do. Actually.
Yeah, I'm happy to deal with it now. CAO is nodding his head. No. Oh, here.
I suggest correspondence.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I just don't want it to fall off and not.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely be dealing with that. Thanks again, folks.
So thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, so up next we have a delegation from the Blackfin Pub. Barbara Hanson, Ed Moyes, and Lisa Moyes are partners in the Blackfin. And Barbara, you have 10 minutes.
I'm also allowed to remove this?
Yeah.
I talk so fast that you need to actually hear
Mhm,
this. So-
okay.
Okay, one sec. So find some glasses, because that's the age. Okay. My name is Barbara Hanson. I'm the general manager of Blackfin Pub located at 132 Port Augusta Street in Comox. I respectfully acknowledge and am profoundly grateful to live, work, and play within the traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. I will be the representative for this application for the co-owners of Blackfin Pub, Ed and Lisa Moyes. Thank you to Mayor Knott and Council for letting me present to you this evening. I understand I just have a few minutes, so I'll make it as quick as I can. Prior to COVID-19, the shutdown in March of 2019, we operated our 2 levels under 2 different licenses issued by the LCRB. Our main floor and upper patio is licensed under a liquor primary license with a capacity of 110. This includes the front of house staff in that capacity number. Our lower level was and is licensed under a catering endorsement. The catering endorsement allows for up to 500 guests with adherence to the fire code capacity level set by Comox Fire. The large guest number is a way of the catering endorsement is set to allow businesses to use that license offsite as well. These catering endorsement licenses replaced the special occasion licenses for business in 2014. We have never exercised the capacity of that license. During the original days of COVID, I had many meetings with the then liquor inspector, Mike Delarond. We have always had a great relationship with our inspectors and have never had a violation during any of their site checks. Mr. Delarond informed me at that time that the BC government would be working with local municipalities to grant our industry TESA expanded service area licenses for enlarged or additional patios due to the limitations of the indoor seating under the COVID-19 PHO. He informed me that those of us who may have space should apply for these licenses. We applied for this at that time to operate our lower patio level and were granted the license. Thank you to the town of Comox for working with the BC government and improving these licenses for our industry. From a small business perspective, these licenses more than likely have saved several local food and beverage businesses during the pandemic. We knew that they would be temporary, and in discussing this with our liquor inspector, he suggested we apply to the LCRB to drop our current catering endorsement and license our entire building, including patios, under one liquor primary license. He likened it to housekeeping with the knowledge that the TESA license that we were given would not be permanent. Mr. Delarond has since left that position, and our new inspector is Greg McCammon, and he is on board with our application. As we were fully aware that when our world would begin to return to a sense of normalcy, our TESA license would then have an end date attached to it. It is set to expire June 1st, 2022. The LCRB has allowed us to apply for a permanent license for our lower patio. That application is pending now. By this, I mean the LCRB has received our application and it has been forwarded to the town of Comox for your approval. Unfortunately, it may be a 10-month process, if approval at all. This permanent license, if approved, will not allow any indoor use, so we still have the need to restructure our licensing for the entire site moving forward. As confusing as this sounds, it's a three-step process for us, which I'll clarify at the end of this presentation. Our research into this new licensing option is what began our application to the town of Comox to vary the existing bylaw in early 2021. As Comox currently has a capacity level of 175 patrons for a pub, we had to factor in that if we did not apply to vary the bylaw, we would no longer be able to offer the many services to our community that we have in the past. As again, an example of this is to operate at a max capacity of 175, we would only be allowed to have 65 people downstairs in the lower level, including the staff. This would not allow for any private functions over this number without closing the pub upstairs. We do rely on these functions in our slower winter months to allow us to keep our entire staff employed full-time and year-round, which is not an easy feat in our industry. We currently have a staff of 52. I also believe that we are one of only a couple businesses in Comox capable of offering these types of events to the community, and that they bring people to Comox that may not have another reason to visit. When discussing what number we feel we would need to continue to offer all the services we have in the past, and taking into consideration what our building design would accommodate within the fire code, we started at 350. But after talks with the town planning department, arrived at 310, including patrons and staff. After receiving the senior staff report Monday morning, their recommendation is for 250 patrons. While we can live with that number, we are still hopeful to meet in the middle of our request at 310 and their recommendation at 250. We feel that even 275 patrons would allow us to offer all services we were capable of under our liquor primary license and our catering endorsement. In saying this, I can count on one hand the number of times we've ever been at 275 patrons while operating the upstairs pub with a stand-up reception downstairs. Just not often, but we'd still like to have that option. The report from senior staff also requests or suggests that we decrease our operating hours to Sunday to Thursday, 9 to 11, and Friday and Saturday from 9 a.m. to midnight. Currently, our licenses allow for an extra hour on all days. In saying this, we never exercise them, even for functions in the lower level. We have no issues for decreasing the hours to meet the senior staff requests, as we have always done so to maintain our good neighbor policy with the residents and businesses around us. We are also closed 2 days a week now, Sunday and Monday, due to the current labor market for our industry. And I also understand that our application was submitted by the town of Comox to Comox Valley RCMP and that they had no concerns with it. We have always maintained a good relationship with the RCMP as they have used our lower space as well for several executive functions over the years. While we fully understand if we switch to a food primary license, we would only be restricted to patron numbers set out in the Comox Fire Code. We have always operated our business as an adult dining and wish to continue with this business model. Hence the reason for this application. We feel we have a unique niche to offer our clients and community in this respect. We have entered into 2 community pre-application consultations, and from the packages I hope you have, you will see that there was a lot of positive support as well as some concerns regarding parking and noise. I would like to address those concerns. We currently have 18 spaces on site and 2 public parking lots adjacent and below our property. While we understand the concerns of a few of the strata owners of the landing property next door to us, we have always coexisted with both our clients using the available parking for both buildings. Our parking spaces are often used prior to us being open at 11 a.m. And we accept that some of the landing senior clients don't want to park in the underground. We are also willing to work with the landing building strata owners on an ongoing basis should the need arise to meet any concerns they may have going forward. As to the noise issues raised, it was predominantly about motorcycles coming from the marina. And unfortunately, that's out of our control. They disturb our deck guests as well. You have to just stop talking for 20 seconds while they go by. The other concern was for our early morning deliveries, and we are working with our suppliers to move those deliveries from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock so that it will be a little bit better for everybody. So to further explain the 3-part licensing we must do to result in our end vision, it is as follows. Rezoning application number 1. We are seeking approval for this rezoning to increase our capacity numbers through you, the town of Comox. 2 would be the permanent TESA license. We are currently in the middle of an application with LCRB to obtain this permanent license for our lower patio. This had to be applied for during this rezoning application due to the fact that it's going to expire June 1st and we didn't know where we were with dates here. And then number 3 would be a consolidation and expansion of the liquor primary license. So if rezoning is approved by the town of Comox for a higher number of patrons, which will allow us to continuing offering our services year round, we will then apply to the LCRB to amalgamate our existing licenses into one liquor primary license encompassing the entire property. We are currently having our signage created and look forward to our public hearing on April 6th. I would like to thank Mayor Arnott and councillors for letting me present tonight. And if you have any questions, I'm going to try my best to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Do we have any questions from council? It's easy. Thank
I do
very
love you
much.
all.
No questions. We will be dealing with this later on in the agenda. As I mentioned to the other folks, you're welcome to stay or, you're welcome to leave too. We have a bit of stuff to get
I
through.
have to
so.
take my senior bosses to another meeting, but thank you for the offer.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the adoption of the regular council meeting minutes from February 16th.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, sorry.
There is a small typo in there for the affordable housing contribution. I was in favor, I was not opposed, and I'm in there as opposed.
Okay,
So just throwing that out there.
all right. Got that. Okay, so
Counselor, yeah, I think there should be a change from Counselor McGowan opposed to Counselor Swift opposed.
okay. All right. And you're good with that, Councillor Swift? That he's
What are they?
I'm surprised anybody reads those. I just flipped through them, so. Yeah. Yeah,
We're all like, whoa.
we'll just let Councillor Swift review that.
So this was on the affordable housing models, and it was whether or not to move forward to the long-term acquisition.
Oh, right.
And the discussion was whether to do long-term acquisition or work with the charitable
Coalition,
organizations. And I believe Councillor Swift, you were in favor of the charitable organizations.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right, so good. All in favor of that? All right, that's carried. Thank you. down to the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, so we're just going to go through, so any of the councilors have any items, you pull it out, we'll discuss it and go from there. Councillor McGowan.
First one I'd like to pull is number 1. I know we get these emails to put up lights and stuff on a fairly consistent basis, and I was just wondering what, like if we even have the ability to do that, if it's something that we can even consider when we get these letters in.
I think this one, there is a light, isn't there? There's a pedestrian light, there's a traffic light, it beeps when you, number 1. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at number 2. All right. Sorry, I went down too fast. So what the CAO and I were talking about just the other day, because I have to give kudos to town staff because they changed the lights at Town Hall blue and yellow to reflect the Ukrainian situation going on, and that perhaps we can look at getting those LED lights, you know, that you have a little remote, you can change them to different colors. So that was something we were just talking about in passing.
Maybe I can just ask the
Yeah.
corporate officer, Shelley, the light ups, do we require a application for that or just a letter from in direction from council? Okay. Yeah. So then to do this would just requires a motion from council to move forward with it. And that's what you were asking, Councilor McGowan? Yeah. Yeah, no, both the motion to direct us to do it and then we'll do that on the 11th.
Can I make that motion, please? Okay.
So you made the motion, second it, and for discussion. All right, for
So-
discussion.
So have we got lights at the town circle? that we
That's,
can do that with?
that was my question.
Well, I always thought that don't we not have that capacity down at the Marina Civil buildings to change the colors of the lights there? Am I wrong?
But
about
there are
that?
only certain colors. See, that's a challenge that we
Yeah.
have here because there's a lot of different groups have a lot of different colors. So, you know, that is limiting us to do these. And I know in the past, we have reluctantly passed on doing this because it's so onerous. So
Andrew, is Andrew online?
Yeah, I'm here.
Andrew, can you comment on where the light ups take place?
Yeah, generally for these sorts of requests, we do it around town circle. We have a set of lights there that we can change out the various bulb colors because we've been supporting a lot of groups over the years annually. So I'm actually in a meeting tomorrow with a company called Signify about trying to look into various options about automatically color changing systems, but it's very difficult with kind of the strand lights versus the ones like at the sale buildings that are directly wired in and have a remote control. So, but we'll see what that is. But yeah, generally we do all the things around town circle.
Andrew, what would you say the person hours are to make the change out of a color right now?
Like how long it takes, it's very minimal. We have all the boxes from our historical ones for the colors, and it's maybe like a half an hour for one person down at Town Circle to switch them out.
Perfect, thank you.
all right, so any other questions or comments on that? So we do have a motion on the floor. So all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And any other items we want to pull out? All right, go ahead.
I'd like to pull out, oh, where is it? Number 6.
Second.
Okay, so go ahead, Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, I would very much like to move this motion and support this this action. We've lost a lot of people over the last couple years, and like 35 in 1 month or something in the valley alone. So I think you know, obviously something needs to change, and this is one of the ways that we can push up and tell people above that have the power to actually change things like this, what needs to be done.
Okay, Councillor Minions.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it looks like just in the last 2 weeks, the other regional areas of Cumberland, Courtney and the region passed it. And I think it's just in support of, it's Gord John's bill. So it's a local bill that's come out. And it's kind of looking through, and it's very, very similar to what we passed in May 2021, just looking at decriminalization for certain personal uses. So didn't want to pass something without kind of reading through it a little bit, but it's a pretty straightforward motion that's very, very similar to what we looked at in May 2021, which was almost unanimous. And it's a good letter to send with a lot of community support coming from the MP and the other councils.
All right, so CAO, we need a motion on that one as well, don't we?
Correct.
Yeah, so Councilor McGowan.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Second.
All right, and any other further discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried, thank you. So, do we have any other ones to pull out? Councilor Bissinger.
Sure, thanks. And I think this goes with all the messaging that we should be doing, but even our agenda says communications around the development at Northeast Woods, which is not the case. I think we need to clarify that we're not developing the Northeast Woods, we're developing the northeast area of Comox. Because there seems to be a lot of misinformation floating around, and I'm not sure if there's going to be sort of like a packaged letter of correspondence that we can send to everyone that has raised some concern, with just outlining, you know, the steps that we have taken, the powers that we have or don't have, and sort of what is the, you know, what does the tree retention policy actually mean, and what the developers are able or not to do. So maybe to the CAO or the communications officer, just wanting to know sort of what's being bundled to the public.
Yeah, no, it's a good point to make sure that we're being precise when we're talking about Northeast Comox versus Northeast Woods. We have a draft response that I would say is probably 90% complete. So we're going to have something going out. By end of week, there's going to be something going out to the people who have written in. I don't expect it's going to answer all of the questions, but it should take care of the majority of the questions that have been asked. And then as we get the second round of questions, then we'll attempt to answer that as well.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Minions.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, depending on other people's thoughts, if there was like a very short like FAQ that could be on our website or part of a communications out with like, I don't know what the most common 4 or 5 questions are, but it really seems to be around the woods versus the area, the tree retention, what that means. And a lot of the information is in our council meeting minutes, but it doesn't seem like those steps are being taken to review those things. So some sort of FAQ where it's like really laid out and only 4 or 5 of the most important things would be something we could all like widely share and then put to the media. So some sort of simplified, most basic questions, and not just to those people, but maybe all of the public.
Okay, thanks. You had something come out the other day. I haven't had a chance to go, but you had the picture of the northeast area, and is that going to be part of the communications piece?
That was out to council, but much of the information is going to be similar. And I believe one of the second map, the map that showed it in the larger context, is in the communication that we're planning to send out as well.
Okay. I know I've been getting calls about it, and I'm going to be meeting a group next week, and we're going to go walk that area just to kind of get everybody understanding that we're not ripping the woods out of there, just the private land. Councillor Grant.
There we go. Yeah, I was thinking in lines of a social media thing with some pictures that show the map and show the developable area and what can be done without, you know, they can do right away. I think you can make a pretty simple social media piece out of it. So, you know, and I think that it, you know, it's not just this issue, but there's a lot of issues where we kind of get behind the issue and then play defense, where we could be in front of the issue and getting the proper news out first. And so, you know, I think this is a good test case for going forward for all sorts of issues that are going to come up.
Yeah, well taken. Anything further on that one? Councillor Bissinger.
Yeah, I know just in Cumberland, there's been a lot of communications about how they've, you know, developed Cole Harbor, and it's not a very walkable, not a very dense type of area. So, you know, the bang for the buck, even in terms of asset management, wasn't I guess there, sort of like the analysis that we did. And I actually shared with one of the residents, like some of the analysis that our staff did with the densification assets versus tax income coming in or whatever. And they were pretty impressed with the way that our staff did that. So that'd be kind of a neat exercise also to kind of showcase, just to show like, hey, we're doing development, but we're actually thinking ahead of like how it actually affects the taxes going forward and how we're looking at our asset management, because that's pretty cutting edge, I think, because there's not a lot of communities that actually look at it through the eyes. So kudos to staff also.
Good, thanks. So I think staff kind of has an idea of what we're looking for on that. So thanks. Any other further on that before we move on? All right, so do we have any other items for the consent agenda? Councillor McGowan?
Yeah, if we could pull and move number 5. I see that it's been approved for the last 2 years, so we may as well approve it again.
All right. All right, so any discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried, thanks. All right, any other items? Councillor Kirk? go ahead.
Just a quick comment about number 7, a letter written by a grade 7 student named Maisie from Call Broad Road. I just wanted to say a big thank you to Maisie for writing a letter. We've never met, I don't know you, but thank you for being involved in democracy and making your thoughts heard, and really appreciate hearing from the youth in the town of Comox. And so, yeah, your comments about the pump track and skate park location, very well received. And I just want to say a big thank you to our youth who are involved and engaged.
Great, thank you. And any further things, Councillor Minions?
Just a quick comment on 8, which was on the native plants being planted like around development. Would we be able to just send a letter back and say that we're doing like a climate adaptation open house and kind of invite her to that, or say that we look forward to those type of ideas at that time when kind of we're going to the community to talk about ideas, just as a response to say, kind of, I don't know how that fits in up until that time, but thank you.
Okay. Anything further? All right, seeing none, we'll complete this consent agenda. And we will move on to unfinished business. Strategic planning and action items report from March the 2nd.
Second.
Any questions or comments on that? Councillor Swift.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we have any update on a court date for the Matt Lang Shake Sides question.
Yeah, it's been difficult to find a date with the changeover in lawyers from the intervener group. It's taken time for them to get caught up on the file, and then after that, finding court dates that are available and then that are also open for both sets of lawyers. It does appear that a date has been agreed upon in September, and we expect it to be heard in September.
Hopefully early September. Earlier the better. Yeah, 16th. Yeah, or 17th, I guess that's Monday. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's good. So all in favor of that? All right. That's. Oh, you have another one? Okay.
Yeah. Jordan, I don't know if you had a chance to look at number 26 under the Public Works, the Balmoral sidewalk, Pritchard to Balmoral design. So it's just confusing because Pritchard and Balmoral is an intersection. So I'm just wondering if it's being described accurately.
But you guys are really doing your homework. That's good. Holy moly. I gotta start looking at this closer.
Basically, we're going to be relocating the sidewalk, the crosswalk of where it currently is, which is on the north side of Comox Avenue where Philburg is, because of the sight lines and the visibility of the turning movement. So in review with the traffic engineers, their suggestion is to move it closer south towards town and relocate it at that location for improved sight lines, and then also to install the pedestrian beacon activated light as well. So it's for improved safety.
And I think
No,
Councillor
that's not the one I'm talking about. I think it's the one associated with the conveyance project. It's number 26 under Public Works and Engineering.
what page are you on in the agenda?
No, 94.
Balmoral sidewalk, Pritchard. Oh, Pritchard Talbot Memorial, yeah.
The sidewalk. Oh, that is so on the south side of Balmoral, there's a transit bus stop that was installed there a number of years ago when we did the updated the transit improvement project that we did. So we were going to, part of the conveyance project, put in the sidewalk along that side and a proper bus stop for to service that bus shelter in that location.
I think Councillor Swift's just asking, is that description correct? Because we're saying the Balmoral sidewalk from Pritchard to Balmoral.
Yeah.
The start is
It's on
at,
the south side. Yeah.
But it's on Balmoral, right?
On Balmoral.
Yes, but where does it start?
At Pritchard and then towards towards Stewart.
Yeah,
and so that needs
that's
to be
all I'm
updated, you say.
querying.
Yeah,
is it just needs to be described from Stewart to Pritchard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're correct. Thank
Yeah.
you.
thanks.
Good on you. Okay. Anything further on that? Okay, so all in favor of the strategic plan? All right, that's carried. Thank you. And so we'll move to the Comox and Rodello roundabouts. We have recommendation, and then we have alternatives to the recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation.
Recommendation that we provide budgetary approval. Second, so for discussion. Okay, all in favor? Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say something, but okay.
All right. I'm not a public speaker, so here we go. So I love roundabouts. I think they're a great piece of infrastructure. They even allow for some nice landscaping or some nice art installation. That said, I will be voting against the design and implementation at Rodello at Comox. Firstly, I don't think it's the right location for it. There are so many more dangerous intersections, such as the one on Glacier View at Comox Ave, that would way more merit such a tax increase and a nice piece of infrastructure as you come into our town. Why are we facilitating things for car drivers? Why are we making it more enjoyable to drive? Aren't we trying to get away from driving cars and trying to move more towards active transportation and public transit? And in the lens of climate change, would the funds not be better used towards upgrading our underground utilities, ensuring our water mains and storm sewers are adequately sized for densification and more frequent and larger storm events? The original transportation study found merit for a roundabout at that location back in 2011, when the site was operating as the Comox Hospital. The urban systems review indicates that the level of service for flow through traffic will remain adequate well into the future. So why not just add turning lanes? We were told 90% of the project will get paid by DCCs that can only be used for infrastructure improvements in areas of development. Well, once these are spent on this roundabout, how about all the future developments on Comox Ave? The one at the mall, the one beside Anderton, or the development in the Guthrie and Aspen areas. Those will likely require upgrades and upsizing to our utilities. So let's keep our funding for those and prevent a tax hike into the future to cover those. There is no such thing as free money, so don't be fooled by this project getting 90% funded by DCCs. As once those DCCs are drained, then that infrastructure funding will have to come from somewhere else, from taxes and our taxpayers. The residents of the area don't want it. Providence aren't the ones asking for it either. And as a taxpayer, I'd rather see that money going elsewhere and kept for critical upgrades that will be required regardless down the road. 0.33 tax increase is not significant, but add that to another roundabout, making it 0.2% all of a sudden, not to mention all the other tax hikes that we're expecting this year and into the future. So for a site that doesn't have a build-out plan yet, and that has a parking made for 80 staff, how many staff leave 19 Comox each day? Probably around 1,200, and all at the peak hours of 6 and 7 a.m. and leaving at 3 p.m. And there is no roundabout in that area. So where does it stop? Inflation is going up, gas prices are going up, interest rates just went up today. So think of how this will also affect your taxpayers' bottom line. We need to be fiscally responsible for our residents, and there is no roundabout way to say that this is a nice to have and not a need to have. Thank you.
Nice one. You've been sitting here, Councillor Grant, too long. All right, thank you very much. So do we have any other questions or comments on this, Councillor Minions?
Yeah, kind of as time goes on and Alex, as Councilor Bissinger is giving feedback and listening to some engineers in the community, it just makes me have a couple more questions. Is it a possibility to have the easements from those three corners that are required done now and hold the project, which I understand would be, we wouldn't get while the sewer upgrade is being done, but is it a possibility to plan for a roundabout in the future with the planning stages while not putting forward the 1.5 million? My concern is we're rapidly seeing the world changing on many different fronts over the last 6 months, and having a spend of 1.5 million that is meant to encourage a BC intersection, you know, B-rated, grade C-graded intersection for a 20-year prediction on where traffic will go could be seen as risky. So is there a plan that we could take the easements and not do the roundabout right now?
Yes, we can get the land dedication now, and then it could be built out at a later date, yes.
Councillor Grant?
Yeah, so I guess just in listening to all that, you know, DCCs as new projects come on, we'll be collecting DCCs from them too. So, you know, it's not like we'll drain the budget and have nothing left. Number two, I think that school board site is going to either the school board will do something or a private developer will do something with that in the not too distant future. And that intersection will become even more traffic than there is already. When you look at the mobility primer, when we talk about car traffic, about 20 years ago, one was done and it showed 75% of the traffic was in cars. The new one was done, came out about 3 months ago. 75% is car traffic. Bikes were 2% back then, 2% again now. So really no change. I have sat at that Rodello trying to wait to get through that light, and you have to get out of your car, walk over, hit the button, walk back. It's the only way out. With the configuration of that intersection, it doesn't lend itself to lights. And so I think that when we have the conveyance project coming, we have money coming to help us with this. And although there may be some other priority places that you could identify as more needed, like the top of the hill, although we don't have the land, and there's a whole bunch of issues with that piece, this is one that we're going to need anyway. And so if we can get someone to help pay for it, and we've got development cost charge monies in the bank now and more coming, I think that this is something that we're going to need either now or in the future. So if we can get someone to help us pay for it, I think now's the time to go with it.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Swift and then Kerr.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had a long time to think about this because when I first saw that project many years ago, I thought, well, that's kind of odd. And I would have preferred to have the roundabout ready to go at the top of Comox Hill. But I think having had a long time to think about it and looking at 2 engineering studies that are recommending it, and the conveyance project coming along, and the possibility of, as Councillor Kerr indicated, the reduction in greenhouse gas, I think that we would be missing an opportunity if we didn't proceed with this project at this time. So I would be supporting it and assuming it's going ahead at the same time as the conveyance.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr.
Well, this has definitely been the most challenging decision for me to make in my short time on council so far. I mean, I really see both sides of this, and I've been sitting on the fence a long time. I just do want to thank Councilor Bissinger for all of your passionate comments about this and the conversations we've had over the last few weeks and months about this. So, you know, I am really, the sticker shock at the cost is definitely there for me. You know, 1.5 million is a lot, and yes, the DCCs are 90%, you know, covered by that. But again, as Councilor Bissinger said, they could be used elsewhere. I counted 6 other intersections myself that would be a priority, you know, 7 myself, and that would be a priority over this for me in town, just thinking about driving around and biking around. But I found out from staff, and I want to thank CAO Wall and the other staff members who said, well, land dedication is a big issue for those other 6, as described in the town report as well. So this is one is easier to get the land dedication, and with the timing of Providence and the sewer conveyance, it makes sense to do this one first, even though it's not the highest priority site. I also recognize that it's part of the 2011 and was part of the 2020 plan as well. And as Councilor Swift said, the decrease in greenhouse gas emissions for all those people idling, going, turning left is important to me as well. Finally, what tips the balance to me is reading the staff report again, and I really do want to trust the town staff and the work that's been done on this, the administration, who are recommending that this is the action that we proceed with, and that's why I'll be voting for it.
Okay, any other questions or comments? And just my own, I do want to thank staff for putting this together. I know it's been a real issue that we've chewed on for quite a while. But you know, the world is rapidly changing, and so is Comox. We have to keep up with it. We're tasked for the governance of Comox, and I think with this at hand, we do have the conveyance project going through. We have Providence that is going to be a big piece of that corner. Somewhere down the road, we're going to see either the school back in place, so there's going to be safety issues there, or it's going to be developed into more housing. So I think as we move forward in Comox, and as it rapidly changes, that is going to be something that we're going to need. So I will too be voting in favor of that. But CAO, a question to you to finalize my thoughts on this. If we were not to do the roundabout, but we were to then do some other fixes, we're looking at quite a bit of money as well, right? We're going to have to use the DCCs to do something to align that street, you know, left turn lanes or whatever.
It really, I wouldn't say that you have to do it, right? It really just comes down to the level of service and queue times that council is willing to accept at the intersection. Now, if you are going to do the realignment with a left-hand turn lane, going east and west bound, that is going to end up costing you pretty much the same amount as it would to do a roundabout. And that's because the road dedication that's going to be required and the sidewalk that's going to have to be removed on the south side of Comox Avenue. So if you'd like to do that, it just makes sense to go ahead with the roundabout. Now, the other option that council could consider is that you realign the intersection with no left-hand turns, so that additional road dedication isn't there. That would bring your cost down to around that 50% of the cost of the roundabout, because you're not going to have to move the sidewalk, you're not going to have to move the hydro. You will get a better result on that intersection, but it's not a world of difference from an unaligned intersection, because the major impact here is the left-hand turns coming north on Rodello. So aligning that intersection will definitely improve it, but it's not that much different from just not doing anything to it.
Okay, thank you. So any other further questions, comments before the vote? So we have the recommendation to, where am I, to proceed? So all in favor? And opposed? We have 2 opposed. Thank you very much. So we'll move down to the Title Cafe Parklet application. This here is a recommendation that it basically falls in line with what we're proposing for, say, for example, the Comox grind.
So did you want this moved, or did you have an alternative thought to this?
I have an alternative thought to this. So since you're asking.
Could we hear that before we?
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Well, I remember you said something, but I wasn't listening.
Yeah. So I've talked with the CAO, and my thought is that because of this, back to the sewer conveyance, and it's going to go along Beaufort, that there could be some disruption to that corner where the Title Cafe is. So if we come and insist that this June they put in an actual wooden deck similar to what the grind is, that they could very well be having to move it out next summer or when the conveyance comes through. So what I'm proposing is that we just leave it status quo for 1 more year until June of 23. and then we revisit it that time. Okay,
Second.
Status quo.
all right. Okay, so any further discussion on that then? So that we leave it status quo? Yeah, go ahead.
Um,
Councillor Swift.
What is the Title Cafe one? Are they wanting to put in a wooden deck?
Well, okay, I did happen to talk to them and they would appreciate if they could just leave it status quo and for the time being as well. And so, get it all figured out after the conveyance stuff. Councillor Minions.
Is that business there? Are they aware of the conveyance that's coming from?
Yeah,
Conversations?
they are.
Okay.
Through the BIA, as I sit on the BIA, I talk about that all the time. And so they cringe when I bring it up, but yeah, so.
It's good to have transparent, what they
Yeah,
want.
yeah,
they know
no,
what's
they're
happening.
totally aware of
Business,
that.
yeah.
They know it's coming, they don't know a lot of the detail.
Correct.
But they know
Yeah.
there's something coming
Yeah.
soon.
Okay, so we have, I guess, moved and second that we'll just leave it status quo. So if there's no further questions or comments, all in favor? Okay, thank you very much. And okay, so now we're going to the rezoning application RZ 21-6, and this is the increased pub capacity for the Blackfin Pub.
And so I'll move alternative A and change the seating to 275 from 310.
275 to 310. Okay, so do we have a seconder on that? Councillor Kerr. So for discussion. Councillor Swift, McGowan, Minions, and Bissinger.
I guess I'm just looking for some clarification from staff regarding the change away from 310.
The 250 number was based on the number of seats that were provided to us in their floor plan and what's in your agenda package. And so the number of patrons, the limit was based on the number of patrons that were there. And that was to limit the number of standing events that may be held. You heard from the applicants today that they'd like to see an extra 25 people to provide a mostly seated event with the ability for some standing and mingling. There's no objection from administration from changing that number from 250 to 275.
Okay, and then we're going to go down here. So Councillor McGowan.
Maybe I can just, sorry,
yeah, sure,
just
I thought you
expand
were
on
done.
that comment from the beginning. So the reason that we were looking at that was based on the bylaws or the zoning bylaws that council has adopted already, which is meant to limit the number of people in liquor primary establishments. So as we went through the analysis, we were attempting to stick as close to the spirit of that bylaw as we could find justification for. Ultimately, the justification for why that is limited is a council justification, not a staff justification. So again, from the administration level, 250 to 275 isn't concerning for us. And the reason why we went down to that 250 was just that council indication that we have in the bylaw to keep the number restricted, that's all.
Thank you. So it was Councillor Minions and then Bissinger.
Yeah, and I apologize if this is in the report, but do we have an understanding of, by changing this bylaw, does it affect other adult pub establishments also that we would want to be aware of for like other parking implications, or is this very specific to that?
This is a site rezone, so this would be the only spot that has it. You do have an alternative recommendation in your report that would allow you to make a change for all zones should you wish.
Okay, so Councillor Bissinger, are you okay with that, Councillor Minions? Yeah, okay, Councillor Bissinger.
Yeah, and sorry, maybe just to the CAO, if you could elaborate on the 310 then. Was staff opposed to 310 or was it just the seating capacity and that council bylaw you're saying?
Yeah, so starting from the higher level, the direction that we have from council through the zoning bylaws is to limit the number of people that can be in the liquor primary establishment. So, just to highlight that in a food primary or liquor secondary establishment, there would be no regulations. The number of people that could attend in the restaurant would be just as fire coded. And as they mentioned, that's about 500 people, right? So if they had a liquor secondary license, they can have 500 people in there. The business operates as if it is food primary. That's what we see their business running as. Now, when it came to the administrative analysis, we wanted to provide, or we were attempting to provide a rational basis for the number that we went to. The application came in at 310. What rational basis could we find to have a number to provide to council? The rational basis that we found was the number of seats there. And again, that's where you hear the applicant saying we'd like to, in the downstairs space, have the ability to have both the seated and some level of standing capacity. And the concern isn't really, I guess what I'm trying to say is the current concern isn't really coming from staff or administration, because functionally this establishment as a food primary or liquor secondary could have 500 people in there. The concern is coming from the council zoning bylaws to limit the number of people in a liquor primary. So the rational basis that we had was the number of seats.
So just a follow up, like, is there appetite within council to go with the 310? Or I guess we'd have to defeat the 275 and do 310.
Yeah.
Is there a motion on the floor yet?
Yeah, we did to move
Yeah.
it to 275, and the rationale for 275, in talking to the owners yesterday, was it was really, the neighbors have some parking issues, so they were trying to kind of find a middle ground to help that, and some of the noise complaints, just to keep it a little more under wraps. And the 275 was their suggestion. They'd be happy with 310 though. So
Yeah.
I'm good either way. I don't. Like they don't ever really hardly ever exceed 275, so it's not a huge deal to them. But I mean, it's whatever you guys want. You want to change it to 310, I'd be happy with that too.
What does the planner have to say about that? Any thoughts on if it was gone up to 310?
Just that, to expand on what the administrator was mentioning is what the license that you're dealing with. So you're dealing not with the owner, you're not dealing with the operator, it's the property and that business and a liquor license. It's a liquor primary license. So tomorrow, under a liquor primary license, no food has to be served. And so whatever seating you have under that situation, if the business model changes, if the ownership changes, you can, under that, have 310 people with no food. And that tends to have a much bigger impact on the neighborhood.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor
If I
Grant.
may too, if you read what we're doing here, we're actually setting this off to public hearing. And I think that when the public comes, 275 is probably a more palatable number for the public rather than the 310, just the optics of it. So, I know you'll probably get some people from the neighbors and maybe some of the parking issues will come up there.
Mhm.
So, I think that was part of the rationale too, is just, it's a nice compromise number, right?
Councillor Bissinger.
Yeah, and I guess to Councillor Grant's comment, in my mind, it seems like it'd be better to rationalize or to to negotiate after the public hearing. So go for 310 and then take in all the comments. There'll be a lot of negative comments, obviously, and then agree to 275. Well, I don't know, but it just seems like a better compromise that way of like, oh yeah, cool, there are
Yeah,
concerns, but
I think that's a fair comment. So do we want to make that amendment then to 310? And then have some wiggle room?
I'll make the friendly amendment if I can.
Yeah, I'm good with
All right, so that we're at the alternative, and that would be alternative A, and it would be the pub seating capacity to 310. So basically what this alternative is. So any other further discussion on 310? Do I have to? So we were at 275. There's an amendment, friendly amendment to put it to 310. So do we need to defeat the?
No, so you can make an amendment. Maybe if we can all agree that it was just an amendment rather than a friendly amendment, then
Sure.
that would make things
Yeah.
easier.
And friendly.
So Shelley, what's happened is they've moved the alternative to the recommendation, and now they've amended there's an amendment on the floor to the alternative to move the number from 275 or from 275 to 310. I know I can help you out afterwards and what's going on.
Okay, because it says 310 there now.
Yeah, so we actually moved a different of the alternate. Now we're back if this amendment goes, we'll be back to the alternative, but I know where we're going in my
Okay.
head, so I can help
Good.
out after.
Good.
And
Somebody
just to
does.
clarify for council, right now, there's an amendment on the floor which would change the main motion, which says 275 people
Right.
to 310 people. So that's the first vote that will be cast
Okay.
unless another amendment comes.
So discussion would be on the amendment only at this point, right?
Right, right. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to speak against the switch from 275 to 310. I think, as Councillor Grant said, they came to us with the 275 number. I would like to say I'm a neighbor of theirs. My medical clinic is right beside the Blackfin, and they do certainly act as good neighbors to those of us at the landings. So if they are coming to us with 275, I think that sounds like makes a lot of sense to me, and also, addresses the parking concerns for the patients as well that use the medical clinic next door. So I would vote against the amendment to switch back up to 310.
Okay. Councillor Minions, you hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when first presented, I liked the idea of the optics of that as far as going, but I think at the end of the day, if I support the 275, which I think is a fair balance, and I might as well vote in favor of that now versus go above what they request and then fight our way back out of the media. So I would vote against the amendment and just be able to say we considered both things, and in council meeting, we decided on the 275 as our recommendation for the public hearing.
Right. I still like the idea of the 310, so I'll vote in favor of that. But do we have any other questions or comments? So this is on the amendment then of 310, correct?
Just a clarification for Councillor Kerr and Minions, though, like their application was for 310.
Yeah.
So the 275 was kind of like an in between, but they did request 310.
Yeah, good point. So yeah, the 350 was first and then they went to 310. Yeah. Okay, so CIO, we're voting on the amendment of 310. Okay, so all in favor? And opposed? 3 opposed, so that's carried. Now we vote on number 2 to give first and second reading.
We not having a vote on the amendment, and that we not have a vote on.
Okay. All right, so voting on the motion as amended. All in favor? All right, and that's carried. Thank you.
I'll move to.
Number 2, that given first and second reading. Okay, any questions, comments on that? All in favor?
Move 3.
Carried.
Second.
All right, and I don't think there's any questions on that, so all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, let me go back up here. I like the electronic agendas, but sometimes going back and forth slows things down. All right, so we're going to go into the operational budget now, and then the grants and aid will be after that. That's what we discussed at the beginning. So we have 3 recommendations. We have a couple alternatives for council. So does anybody
Move 1, 2, and 3 all together.
individually?
I'll move 1.
Okay, that council approves the operational budget as attached in Appendix A. Do we have a seconder for that?
Second.
All right, so for discussion. Councillor Minions.
Can I just ask a question on, I think it's agenda page 311, there's the special government protection, and on the budget, it showed that it was 2,895% over. And I was just wondering kind of where that comes from in the budget. I think it's for police protection or policing, but and it was page 311, and I also have lost my page on the agenda. So I guess.
Sorry, something on page 311 showed 2,000% over.
It was page 311 and it was government protection, which I think is policing, and it had like a $10,000 number, and then it showed that we were 2,895%. I was trying to make sense of that line, but I've lost it on my agenda.
Yeah, no, I can see it. That is police costs as well as fire, Clive, that 10,000.
I'm just trying to find it. Sorry. I'm on page
There's the
211.
30,000 on general government and 10,000 on, oh, this isn't special projects. Okay, this isn't core. All right, that'll explain some of it. So my guess is
Oh.
what's happened is Clive can,
Sure.
I won't guess, Clive will tell you.
Yeah. Okay. So under special projects, protective services, is this the one we're looking
Yeah.
at? Okay. So special projects is random. There will be no budget on an item, no spending one year, and then suddenly there'll be a spending. They're not related. It's not an operating budget. That's a core recurring expenditure. Special projects just arrive and then they disappear. So oh, I'm sorry, but I see where you're looking at right now. The 2,895, the variance. Protective services 289. That was the. Can you give me a minute? I'll go back and look it up. I think I remember what this is, but I want to be sure. 289 special expense we had 289. I'll come back to that one, Jordan. I'm just going to go and look it up, the number.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So Bissinger first, then McGowan.
Sure, thanks. And a couple of meetings ago, we talked about adding more staff to the engineering team. Is that considered under this budget?
Yes, we have we haven't requested a permanent increase to the engineering team. We have requested a permanent additional member of the public works crew, but we do have funds available to bring in engineering support.
And Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, I had a similar question to Nicole. There was on page 312 under general government, there was a 1,317.7%
I'll come back.
difference.
Okay. When you're ready, I'll answer the first question. We had BC wildfires. BC wildfires are not budgeted. So the actual expense of 279,000 was offset by a revenue of about 600,000. So we made considerable money on the BC wildfires, but we're unable to budget the costs. So there was no budget on protective services for BC wildfire costs. There was just a 10,000 for normal special projects. And then we came in at a $289,000 cost for BC wildfires work. But it was a net revenue to the town, that line. And then there was another question, another line I could look up.
I think that was Councillor McGowan. You had the other question for him?
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually just on the next page, on page 312. That's the general government line, and it was 1,317% over, I think, and was just curious what that was for.
Under capital, or I'm sorry, I'm trying to find.
Page 312.
The line for capital, general government capital spending.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just go and take a look. I'll just come right back with that one as well. 1 second.
Okay. Councillor Grant.
Yeah, so I'm looking at our budget and we're at 5.78%, which to me is higher than I would really like to see. I noticed that with inflation and the increase at 2.38, I get that we'd be right around the 3%, which is a more palatable number, and I understand that. I'm wondering how we could get this budget under the 5% range, if there's a method to do that. And secondly, I know that Clive has told me the other day that we had 8 commercial properties that got converted back to residential, and that burden is going to get taken on probably through the residential. Is that part of this, or when we come up with this budget and we get a number of, say, 4.8 or whatever it comes to, is that going to go on top of that at the end? Or because what I'm thinking is this number isn't going to be the final number, right? So I'm just wondering, we've got Clive doing dances over his office.
CAO, is that something you can answer, what Clive is?
Yeah, I can take that. So at 5.78, there's an ability for council to bring the overall tax increase down. Now, what I would say is that 5.78% increase is the increase in revenue that we are saying is required to do it. And at the next budget meeting where council's looking at taxes, council is going to have to decide where to shift that burden. We still need to do a little bit of analysis to find out what has actually happened to the business rolls, and we still need to get the finest business roll in. Now, if what we kind of suspect, or what what our CFO has told you continues to bear out that we have lost a number of businesses off of the business roll, and that has resulted in a lower number of businesses on the roll. Council is going to have to make a decision. Do you want to still continue to collect the same amount of money from businesses as you did last year? If you do, that would mean there's a larger percentage increase for the businesses that remain. What council may do is say, well, let's shift that proportionally so that it's covered by some of the residential. And if that were to happen, then you may end up having to shift some of the burden over with a slightly larger increase on your residential. So again, that 5.78 is the total increase in revenue that's required. And the impact on the representative household is based on the 2021 numbers, not the 2022 numbers. So there is the potential for that to change. But having said that, you have 1.85% in non-market growth. So that would actually bring the impact on representative households a little bit lower, while shifting the business burden over would bring it higher. And where does that cancel out? We need the final rolls before we can know that. But it should be about there. Now, just to answer the last part, if council wanted to bring that number below 5%, you can reduce spending in some of the areas. I would say you can't. There's nothing you can do about the inflationary increases. The inflationary increases are what they are. You could look at not funding one of the position that we've done here. You could open up your capital and special projects budgets and take a look at what's added on to there. In the non-market increase, which is about 1.85%, I think what we've put in that report is, staff is saying, let's at least set 1% of that aside into reserves. If you wanted to decrease taxes by use that 0.85, that would bring you down below 5. But that would be dependent on council not adding anything else in that brought you above 5. So you've got grant and aid requests that are coming. And then the next meeting, the next regular meeting, you'll also be looking at your youth recreation projects that you want to move forward with. And with that, you could easily pull yourself up above 5. And if you wanted to get below 5 with that again, you'd have to go look at your capital and special projects, or look at your asset manager position, or look at a different level of service that you don't feel needs to be provided in the community. And that's where we would find the ability to do that. And then the third option, which I would say is the least, would be the lowest on the recommendation list from administration, would be to just take it from, increase your yearly asset deficit, take it from your asset reserves rather than, and I would say from an administration's perspective, I would say that's probably the last place you should go.
Thanks. So Councillor Grant and then Minions.
Yeah, so just on the commercial piece there, remember when you're doing that like if you took 1% off of commercial and spread it over residential, it's about 1/8%, right? Because it's a bigger number. So it's not as big a burden on residential as it is on commercial. Just
Okay, duly noted. Councillor Minions.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Grant said, getting closer to 6% is meaning our property taxes are going up in, every 12 years, doubling. And looking around at other communities, there's massive. Campbell River average taxes are like $5,000 to $6,000. So I don't want to see us go in that direction. And at 6%, we start to get onto that path potentially. But what is the realism of being able to find like an asset manager position in the shorter term, like in the next 6 to 9 months? Is that something we're budgeting where it's likely we may not be able to fill that position, or what's kind of the plan for the timeline of that $120,000 earmark position?
Our hope is to fill it as soon as possible. Realistically, it will take some time. We have budgeted for the total value of that position because part of the funds that won't be used this year would be used for the engineering support. Yeah.
Is that the position that would take some of the pressure off of our parks person who does this on the side of his desk? Is that correct? We're talking about Andrew.
Yeah, so part of it would be part of this position that we're looking at is facilities maintenance, which is underneath Andrew's supervision right now. And this would be to take that and move that folder onto somebody who dedicate more time to it. Yes,
because I know that position is quite onerous in and of itself now, and to have that taken off of him would be good. Okay, Councillor Minion, do you have another question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Have we now allocated the full COVID relief fund that was around $1 million? Has that now been fully spoken for, which is, I think, how we kind of looked at getting a percentage off last year? Is that spoken for?
We are drawing down, we're attempting to draw down the rest of it this year. And if you recall what I told council last year is, I would suggest not worrying about where staff is drawing that down. Just we're going to draw it down as soon as we can, because then we get the money, it's in our bank account. Council can use that money however you want. As you mentioned last year, you had the 1% tax increase, and you see in the increases this year is the deferred, the 2021 deferred 1%. You could use that to defer 1% as well. It just pushes it to the next year to catch up on. Yes.
So if I could just have one
Yeah, go
last
ahead.
question. 'Cause the way this is a different way of budgeting that I'm used to, so I always get a little bit confused with this, but if I'm reading this correctly, we're not setting the budget rate tonight. That will come at the next meeting, so we'll set our tax rate at a future meeting. Am I correct with that?
That's correct. So the way that we've gone about this is first we did our capital and special projects that were decided, and you can see the impact that has on your report on page 308, which shows the 1.12% increase required. What we're doing right now is setting our core budget, which is showing you that if you approve everything, it's the 2.38 plus the 1.28 in order to fund everything. So we're not setting tax rates tonight. We can't set the tax rates tonight because we have to get the finalized roll. But what council is doing at every step along the way is setting the amount of money that you're going to be spending, for which you will have to make up in revenue at the next meeting. So if you move forward with everything that's here, you're not actually setting the tax rates, but you are saying how much money you're going to spend, which will force you to make tax rates that are commensurate with the increases you've approved today. Does that make sense?
Yes. Or when we get the big shock and it's 15%, we can start getting rid of some of the things at the next meeting. I guess
So-
I just want to make sure we're not finalizing anything tonight, that we've still got some time. Because when you start looking at some of the things that could be added, that you are asking, we have the ability to have a fairly high tax rate here. And I think, the rubber has to hit the road here pretty soon as to what we're actually going to do. Like, for instance, when we look at the youth things, we look at a skateboard park, if that's $1 million or $2 million, all of a sudden this budget's completely different.
The numbers that are going to come to you in your next meeting where you're setting the tax rates are not going to change unexpectedly. I'd say what we're providing to you here is accurate, and it reflects the changes in spending in this budget. To your point about additional spending that has yet to be decided would need to be paid for in this budget, which would increase it. So if a skate park was something that council added to this year's budget, it would impact the percent. But there's no chance that between now where I'm saying, or we are saying, administration saying that 5.78% is required to fund, and then the next meeting we've gone up to 7 or 9 or 12, that won't happen. But council may, in the intervening time, add more items to the budget that push it up. So
Okay, thank you. That's kind of what I was getting at.
Okay, thanks. We did have Clive looking at something, didn't we? Was he looking for
Clive,
something?
when you found where that is, my guess is just where the capital projects were
Yeah,
allocated.
okay.
They're different from
I think
what you
we
said.
probably even forgot what the question
Yeah,
was.
no,
right
I,
now.
I did
Okay.
find it, and it's just an allocation under the budget column. There was 312,000 for the IT capital spending. We spent 248. That's just not showing in the budget there. So there's an allocation in the budget. I need to refresh that page, and so I will and send that back to you, Jordan.
That's
Total is correct. It's just in the details. It's not showing the budgets properly next to the actuals for the capital. So that has to be refreshed.
we can update that and we'll send it out. But it's not additional spending that was not anticipated or wasn't approved by council. The one other thing that I want to make sure that council understands is that we have been moving through, and the numbers that have been presented here represent the net change in spending that is going to happen for the residents of the town of Comox for a static provision of services. Now, what is going to happen this year is that the economic development function is going to transfer, most of it is going to transfer from CVRD back to the town of Comox. So what we need to do is take the money that CVRD was taxing for that function. It now needs to be taxed by the town of Comox. That will result in a 2% difference, or a little bit more than 2% than what you see here. It's the 5.78 plus the 2%. That is what needs to be, that's what needs to be requisitioned by the town of Comox. But that 2% is net neutral to the taxpayer. It is simply a transfer of requisition from the CVRD to the town of Comox. So does that make sense? Net neutral to the taxpayer. In the presentation here, it's not showing as a tax increase because it's not extra money that the residents are paying for the service. It's the same amount, but it will be 2% more that's required to be collected by the town of Comox. And not by the RD. And just to make it a little bit more confusing, that transfer isn't taking place 100% this year. The CVRD will be requisitioning 60,000, about 60,000 for the service from the town of Comox residents, and then we will be requisitioning in this budget 130, or if council changes to 190.
Yeah, thank you. All right, do we have any other questions on that? Councilor Minions?
I think I already know the answer, but ask it anyway. With the RCMP budget, I know we are waiting for kind of a $500,000, payback of hours owed, and every year we kind of seem to get around the 1.4, 1.5 as far as the RCMP costs, and we're expecting those increased costs. But is there any kind of wiggle or room, like kind of in that budget when we're collecting 2.25 and we really don't know if it's going to be 1.5 to 2 million? Is there any room for like 1% to come out of that budget? Because it seems like we're being quite cautionary on that, which I think is a good thing. But it also seems like there's one place that could be the biggest gap of what we're actually paying versus what we're budgeting. It seems to be kind of in that area. And I fully understand that 2027 will come and that we will have that large cost, but it seems like there might be a little bit that could be in the budget with the RCMP line, being that they haven't charged us those back costs and we've now gratefully avoided that 15,000. So is there any buffer room at all on that RCMP line?
So the RCMP costs will be charged this year. That is, we received an email this morning that this has been done. They're calculating it and it will be coming this year. So that 500,000, once we get the calculations on what that number is going to be, it will need to be paid out of this year's budget. Now, to your other question is there some wiggle room in the RCMP budget given the fact that we aren't having to pay for the additional 20% of costs, right? There is some. It really, I guess, would just depend on the rate at which council would like to replenish their public safety reserve. Because right now we're anticipating our public safety reserve to go back down to zero, which is on a normal year, that's okay. But as we're showing in that report, we're budgeting right now $1.7 million for our CMP costs, when we're contractually obligated, should they go to full staffing, to pay $2 million. And we have paid $2 million in the past. I think going back 3 years ago, we actually did pay about 2 to 2.1 million. So let's say this year or next year or possibly the year after, depending on how fast the public safety reserves were rebuilt, and we got one of those big years where we had a $2 million spend, then we would have to come to council and say, how do you want to pay for that? Are we going out for taxation? Are we going to borrow from reserves or a different reserve fund to do it? So we do have the ability this year to take a look at how quickly we want to replenish the RCMP reserves. And the other part of it too is we should know, because we got the email today, it came through showing or letting us know that they were going to be sending us the numbers in a relatively short future. So by the time we get to your tax rate meeting, we should know exactly what that amount should be. If it's below 500,000, I would say that you probably can be more comfortable in saying that you do have some wiggle room. If that number comes in at above 500,000, I think it's going to be really difficult to say that there is. So hopefully over the next week, we can get the answer to that, and you will know it before you have to set your tax rates.
Just as a quick follow-up, that is a one-time catch-up, is it not? That's not something that will be
Correct.
added every year. Okay.
Yep.
So to me, it looks like there could be a little bit on there, but reserves are good also.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bissinger.
Sure, thank you. I know, with the federal government, it seems like work from home is kind of an accepted thing going forward. Is there opportunity for the town of Comox staff to either work from home or have some sharing of office space that way? And then we could cut down on certain costs like the lease that we have on Comox staff. Like, will that gain any significant savings for the town or?
We haven't gone down the path of looking at a transition to working from home. It's something that we could do. It's something that I would only want to do after reports and direction from council. But it is something that I think we need to start looking at, we need to start grappling with, because we know we're in an aging town hall. We know we're in a town hall that can not last for significant periods of time, and we need to start planning on what that's going to look like. I want to make sure that we're building an office to serve the public in the 21st century. And what does working look like in the 21st century? Ultimately, that's going to be a council decision, is what does working in the town of Comox look like in the 21st century for you guys? I would say that it is definitely discussions and evaluations that need to happen. Is it something that could happen for this year's budget? No, I think this is something that's going to take a little bit more time, because we're really only getting into the first year of large scale working from home across deeper sections and organizations. Working from home has always been available for certain types of employees, for certain types of contractors. It's always been there, but the level of depth at which working from home is now taking place is brand new. And it's really hard for, I think, even over the next year or two, as we look at what we want to do for a new town hall, I think even at that point, council is going to have to make a decision based on your best prediction of what the future will be, and you won't have best practices established. So long-term, great question. This year, just not something that we would be able to do to a way to get rid of the number of staff that we have in that leased building.
Thanks. So we've had a lot of discussion on that. Any final comments before we take the vote on number 1, that we approve the operational budget as attached in Appendix A? All in favor? That's carried. Thanks. That council approves the updated
Second.
strategic plan as attached in Appendix B. So moved. And was there a seconder there, Councilor Bissinger?
Second.
Yeah. So any comments, questions? All in favor? Carried. 3, that the budgetary approval for the construction of the Marine Services Building be approved. So that was great, getting that secondary grant. I was sitting at home on an evening and my phone rang at about 7 p.m. And I thought it was a bit of a prank. Somebody said I had Minister Harjan on the line. Yeah, okay. And the phone clicked. The phone clicked, and Minister Harjan called me on my first name and said that he had just signed a check for $380,000. He's a big supporter of Comox. He was the D&D minister that approved the fixed wing SAR building, and he was very happy to do that. And I just want to recognize our MP Rachel Blaney on that too. Rachel and Christy, who work with her, Christy, they were very instrumental in working with Jordan and I to get the information to Ottawa. MP Blaney crossed over, spoke with the minister a few times, made him aware of our need and the timeliness of this. And so, it was a great effort by 2 parties to work together for a small town. And I think we are really benefiting from their close working relationship. So that was great. So I appreciate both of them to help us out. So for number 3, any other questions on that? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, let me just go back up. So now we're looking at the grant in aids request. And we have a recommendation and we have alternatives to the recommendation.
So I would move alternate number 1, which is the
Alternate.
15,000 for the Destair Senior Center elevator.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments on this?
Yeah, I don't really see this as a grant and aid. This is a piece of equipment and building we own. that
Correct,
we
it's a capital
should be
cost.
looking after, so.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of mislabeled there, but.
Yeah.
We should go ahead.
Yeah, and at the time, I mean, they were trying to do a good thing and they were looking at it was going to be quite expensive and kudos to them for raising what they could, but yeah, it does fall on our responsibility. So any comments on that? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And Councillor Kerr,
For number 2 and 3, could they be moved to the budgetary process discussion, or does that have to be decided tonight?
CAO, how would you like that proceeded with 2 and 3?
So it's up to council. If you wanted to wait until you got to your tax setting meeting to know exactly what those rates are going to be, you could do that. But this is, again, it's outside of policy, so these are just
Yeah.
council decisions, but doing it before doing it at the tax rate setting meeting would be the absolute latest, I would say, because we're gonna be doing the budget bylaws after that. So
It definitely gives us an idea of what we're looking at if we do it at that point.
yeah, you can move it to there.
Okay, so we have a mover, we have a motion for that then? Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on that? Councillor Swift?
Thank you. I always find this kind of request a little difficult. I find it's a curse and a blessing at the same time. It's a curse because you're disappointed to not be able to support causes because there's so many worthy causes and many are supported by volunteers, and often the little money will go a really long way. But the blessing is that we don't have to choose winners and losers. And it can be very divisive on council. It becomes a bottomless pit at some points because once you have a program, you're going to get more requests. So I'm looking at a situation where if we support Lush, then maybe the food bank will come. Maybe we should be supporting the breakfast program at schools. And it becomes an endless request for dollars. We've had a request for the wounded warriors, and there's another group where, those people have put their lives on the line for us, and they've had consequences for that. And it makes it very difficult to not support some of these causes. So, and it goes on and on. We have our youth climate action measures, and I'm sure they would like some money to be devoted to their cause. And Yana, and I can't think of a cause that we haven't had come to our table that I wouldn't have wanted to support if we had the money. So, it's really hard to have a grant and aid program, but when groups come, we know that we don't have that money to be able to support them, and so that we can just direct them to other sources or whatever. But it doesn't put us in the position of having to support one group over another, and I really appreciate that.
Over
Thank
the
you,
years, budget time would come and we would have a lineup of people looking for money. And, at one point we just said, okay, hold it, this isn't working. And it all started just like this, right? One here and one there. And so we took a policy of not giving grants and aid. And it was probably the best policy we put in a long time, because I always look at this a little differently and go, this is not my money. This is taxpayers' money. Who are we to pick where their money should go? I don't believe that we should be doing that. So I have a bit of a problem with it in that principled stand, but also, when it starts to snowball, it gets out of control really fast. And so, we did really well and people got the message pretty quickly. And, I happened to be at a meeting the other day where there was a Courtney council in Cumberland, one and they went, God, that's the worst day of our lives on Grant and Aid Day, because we got to pick and we just hate it, right? Like we just don't do it. Like we just don't want to do it. And I said, well, that's why we don't do it. And they all went, boy, I wish we did done that. Because it becomes that if you let it get on too much. But my real thought is on number 3, and I've always been a little bit confused on the radio, the Compass radio, and what their request really was. Like, were they looking for us to grant the money? Were they looking for us to buy some ad spots? I'm not sure what they were looking for, because it seems to me that, that's a business and we shouldn't be supporting one business over another. So I'm not sure that that's, if they were coming and asking us if we would buy some ad spots. Well, I'm sure we will over the years. Like, I don't even know how to get on the radio station. I tried the other day and I can't tune into it. So I don't know, I don't even know what it is yet.
I believe it's on the internet you access it, but.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
what is that? What's the internet? Is that computer? Yeah. No, but I thought I was trying to figure it out and it was just getting so, but if it's, it's problematic if we're supporting a business. I don't think we should be doing that. If they want us to buy some ad spots, depending on what their radio is and how popular it is, I'm sure we would do that anyway. So, those are just my thoughts. I mean, if we're going to move it to the budget, that's fine. We can have that discussion later, but.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna go with Bissinger
Sure.
and then Kerr, you had a chance, and then I'll go to McGowan.
I think similar to what Councillor Swift and Councillor Grant were saying, I think I vote against the current motion just to kind of not refer to budget, because I agree that I think we should not be picking where the tax money goes to different charities.
So it's just confirmed, so you're not comfortable with it going to the next process?
Correct. I don't think it should go to the next process.
Okay, so,
I think
well,
we should just end here.
we could deal with it today, but I'm gonna go back to Councillor Kerr and then McGowan, and then I think I saw Minions.
Yeah, I just want to say, Councillor Grant made a good point. I was wondering if I can just alter my motion to remove 3, so just remove Compass Radio and
Yeah, I think I'm.
keep Lush Valley to go to the next process, the budget.
Okay, so right now we're discussing, so the motion on the floor is to move the Lush Valley to the budgetary process, closer to it, the CAO.
No, the motion on the floor is to move items 2 and 3 to the next budget meeting. And then I believe Councillor Kerr is intended to make.
Okay, so we'll vote and defeat that, then take the next one too.
You can do that, yes.
Yeah. All right, so any other comments on that before we vote, defeat that and start all over again? Yeah. So all in favor of moving 2 and 3 to the budgetary process? Opposed? All right, so that's carried. Thank you. And Councillor Kerr.
So then I'll move item 2 to go to budgetary process. Maybe just a question as I make this motion. I see on the next page, you provided the April 21st, 2001 report about all the different financial aids and permissive tax grants, exemptions. Is that going to be discussed as part of the budgetary process, or is that discussion for tonight as well?
Those were the historical ones. Now, there are a number of reoccurring donations that happen in there. I guess I would have to put that back to council. Do you want to go through the yearly kind of approved historical items that are always there? And if you do, then yeah, we should move that to take a look at what they are and whether or not you want to keep funding them items. Clive, I saw you pop up there, so don't run away quite yet. He's more familiar than I am, but there a number of them are reoccurring, like the Citizens on Patrol, I believe. Some of the money we put towards Clive, which are the ones that are reoccurring?
Sure.
I'm trying to find the report here.
I'll just open it up and just give you the readout of it. Give me a moment to open the file.
Can I ask the ones that are recurring, are they already in the budget?
Yes.
Yes.
The annual recurring grants. Okay,
So I found the page here. So we have 40,000 in the budget to put towards a project for the Coalition to End Homelessness. The Comox Archives and Museum grant is ongoing. Nautical Days is ongoing. Sid Williams is ongoing. The utilities are, if ever, sorry, I'll back up. Page 298. So the Coalition to End Homelessness is ongoing and in the budget. Comox Archives and Museum grant ongoing in the budget. Lush Valley Food Box, they came as a one-time last year, so that's not in the budget. Nautical Days is in the budget. Sid Williams in the budget. Destair in the budget. Auxiliary policing in the budget, art gallery in the budget. Clive, if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong.
Nope,
Citizens
you're correct.
Patrol,
Yeah.
is in the budget. Legion is in the budget. Crime prevention's in the budget, and Mac Lang Bursary is in the
Yep.
budget. And
Correct.
then the rest of them coming from the CVRD, Victim Services, Justice Service, and Search and Rescue, those are ongoing as well. So the town has all of those on page 298, other than the Lush Valley Food Box, are in the budget included right now, and we would be handing out next year. So and that's where I would throw it back to council. Do you want to have this report brought up and look at whether or not you want to continue these grants? And that would be council's decision.
Mhm. Okay, we were on this side, so I think you were done, Councillor McGowan? Okay, would you like to? Perfect. And then we'll go to Minions and then back over to Swift and then Kerr.
Oh, thanks. I know things are tight for everybody right now, but that's also, I think, one of the reasons why doing the grant and aid to Lush Valley is so important. The good food boxes bring food from like local farmers and during COVID, local restaurants, so that they didn't go bad. And they bring food to people all over the valley, but Comox as well. Elderly people who maybe can't get all the way into Courtney to the food bank. You know, when our people are struggling, and it's not, I would hate to see more people struggle than they need to. And I think Lush being a local place that, you know, they don't have a lot of other areas, I think, that they can get money from necessarily, but these good food boxes bring good food to people here in town who can't necessarily get it. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to support. I know it can come across as a slippery slope, but when it comes to this kind of thing and making sure our local families have good food to eat, I think that's a good thing to support.
Yeah, thank you. And Councillor Minions?
Yeah, just, I wanted to say that I appreciate kind of the history of us not doing the grant and aid, and we probably haven't had the experience of having request after request and delegation after delegation. So I can really appreciate, I think there's over 100 societies, charities, and kind of groups just in the Comox Valley. So I think we possibly could be opening ourselves up to how we aren't being equitable and fair with how we look at these things. So I really appreciate that that's kind of where Comox has been when we look at the taxpayer. So personally, I would rather it come from, if it's a strategic priority of the council to be supporting, for example, food policy and input, it would kind of be our direction out to the community as like an RFP or something that comes from us versus I think Lush Valley does amazing, great work, and I'm happy to see they're going more into the governance and kind of policy advising. But at the end of the day, I don't know that that's the best fair and equitable process for us to do grant and aid. So I'm not against food policy grants or funding, but I think the way it's now on the budget kind of annually or proposed, it is a grant and aid, and I would like to see us stay away from those. So similar to how the coalition, they've really come together and done great work, and that's a strategy for us. We give them funding. I like that model versus, as Councillor Swift said, we don't know that the food bank or other great food organizations wouldn't then come forward. So I'd rather it be a strategic council directive of what we're looking for and us setting a budget versus kind of the other way around. So it's hard to vote against, but I would vote against it today and kind of come up with that at our next strategy on how we look at food policy.
Okay, thank you. On this side, I think we had Swift and then Kerr.
Thank you. And I agree with your comments, Councillor Minions, and also Councillor McGowan. I'm not meaning to suggest Lush doesn't do a good job. I think they provide excellent food for people that really need it. But my question is just going back to the list for a moment. The $3,000 for the Legion, one-time conditional on other grants. So is that an ongoing one, or was it just a one-time one?
I might have misspoke on that. That's Clive, is there 3,000 in there for the Legion this year? You're muted, Clive.
Muted.
This is the 2021 list, and there was a couple one-time. The Lush Valley was a one-time, and so was the Legion. It was a matching grant. If they received their grant, we would pay a matching grant one time in 2021.
Thank you.
I read a cartoon the other day and it said Zoom is like the modern day seances where you say, hello, is anyone there? Hello, can you hear me? Okay, so Councillor Kirk, go ahead.
Question the CAO, the permissive tax exemption, when does that get discussed? Is that tonight or again at the?
No, that will come in the future. Clive, when is the permissive tax
The permissive tax exemptions actually is done in 2021. We have to have the permissive tax exemption to the BC assessment by October 31st of 2021 for the 2022 tax year. So the permissive tax exemptions, there's statutory exemption. We only give exemptions where there's already a statutory exemption for the building and the land immediately under the building. So churches and organizations that are deemed by the province to have a statutory exemption. Those are the properties we give a statutory permissive exemption for the area around the immediate building, provided it's not used in any commercial way. So it's sort of an ongoing standing, very common throughout the province. And so those are done in the year before, so they can hit the 2022 tax roll. So we'll be starting to receive applications again in May of this year for the 2023 tax roll.
So you'll be making the decisions for the next council. But Clive, I believe we also provide permissive tax exemptions to groups that aren't statutorily entitled to it. Because we have Tigger 2, Comox Archives and Museums. I think there's a number of properties that aren't statutorily required and that we also provide it to them.
Okay.
And so what happens, Councillor Kerr, is that they have to submit an application. Those applications come to council and council will decide them on an individual basis for the year proceeding.
Yeah, and I would note too that we already give a permissive tax exemption to the Legion to the tune of 13,000. So, you know, they're in looking for, well, I don't think they are looking for 3,000. I think that was a one-time thing, but they're already getting a permissive tax exemption. So.
CAO, I remember a conversation we all had here 6 months ago, and it was maybe we need to start looking at putting a cap on what we give for grants and aid. You know, we come up with a number and then we give a percentage to each one. I think Victoria does that, Langford or another community down there. It's something maybe we can think about as we move forward into the new year, because they are starting to get onerous. So I think we got all the discussion we had with this. So what the motion on the floor is that we move number 2 to the budget. I'm also hearing that there may be some interest in not moving this forward. So you have an option of defeating that, and then we could have a motion just to pass on number 2. So we'll take the vote on number 2.
I don't think we have a motion on that. I think we defeated it. I don't think we.
No, I think, yeah, there's a
had-
motion and it was
No.
seconded.
We had a motion, I think number 2, a motion was made, but then Councillor Kerr, you asked a question right away, so I still think it needs to be
Well, I thought
seconded.
Councillor Grant seconded.
I could be wrong, that's what I picked up.
Yeah.
Okay, then there's a motion on the floor for item 2.
Okay. Okay, so regardless, I do believe we have a mover and a seconder on it. Are we fair enough with that? We're gonna live with that? And we've had the discussion, so all in favor of number 2 of moving it to the budgetary process? Opposed? So that's defeated. And do we have another motion?
So should we receive this for information or?
You're fine to, if there's no action to be taken, no
Yeah.
motion is required.
Okay, so we'll carry on. Thank you very much.
We can actually do the first one.
Right.
Correct, yeah.
And Shelley, I was whispering over to Shelley that what did we do with number 3? Did we move that? We voted on it, so defeated it. Okay, so we're good now. All right. Okay, so all right. I think we're good. Okay, so we're at correspondence and
Move that we receive the correspondence and that we refer that to staff for some more direction on what a building would look like and
Yeah.
and a location.
yeah, and that's kind of what they're expecting as well, is what with them. So, all right, so we have a mover on that. seconder, any further questions on that? All in favor? Okay, great, thank you. So I know Councillor Bissinger has to get going. Do you, oh, yeah, sorry, thank you. We had the, under correspondence, the Comox First Nation support for the Guardian Watchman program. So what was the ask on that, CAO? Are we looking at a,
$5,000 a year with a 4-year commitment was the request.
okay.
So you
So
just received that.
move, does everybody
receipt,
move
yeah.
receipt?
Well, I guess that could be done, yeah.
So are you okay with that? Move it to the budget process?
Sure.
Okay, is there a seconder on that? Okay, any discussion on this? So Councillor Swift?
Well, I guess, once again, this is an example that could be considered a grant in aid, so we can move it to budget, but I think we need to be really aware of what we're doing here.
Councillor Swift, sorry, Councillor McGowan?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to add that, you know, relations and working with the First Nation is one of our top strategic priorities. So I think this would fall under that, and you know, it's a way to show good faith and help out.
You know, I note that Campbell River provides 5,000 per year over 5 years, quite a larger community, bigger tax base. I wonder if, you know, we could have a little bit lower of a number, but you know, that's not on the floor. So any other questions or comments on this? Councillor Bissinger?
Are we sure like it's not a business, like it's actually a nonprofit? Like, does that,
Yeah, and I
is that
don't
stated
know that.
anywhere? Is it-
CIO, what do you think?
I believe it to be a nonprofit. If council moves it to the next meeting, I'll have further conversations. My recollection from this is that this is a nonprofit group.
If we do move it to budget, could you also find out if they're just asking for the same amount from each community, or if it's done by population, or how that works?
The request has been, I'll verify, but I believe it's 5,000 each community.
Kirk, Councillor Kirk?
Yeah, I'm always looking for opportunities, ways we as a town can partner with KFN. And I think, I just need more information. The letter was pretty short, didn't give a lot of examples of activities that the Watchmen do actually in Comox, the town. So any further details that you're able to provide, help us make that decision would be great.
Councillor Minions?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I noticed the letter was kind of short. They do have a website that has a little bit more information of who the Watchmen are, which parks they do. So I'm sure staff would direct us to that anyway. But if anyone between now and the meeting wanted to take a look, the website had a little more information than this. And I also still had a couple more questions. So referring to budget was more of just giving me time to more explore.
Okay. All right, so that's what we have, that referring it to budgets. So any other questions? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Now, I believe we are done. So I'm going to go with Councillor Bissinger for any things to add.
So I had
Member
a,
council.
it's gonna go. Had a meeting with the Nautical Days organizer Dave and Councillor Curry yesterday, and we've got quite a few questions. So we were just trying to figure out what the best platform was to get council's input on it. And I don't really want to go over them right now, just because we should probably talk about a few. So I'm not sure, maybe just an email to the CAO, and then we can send out questions, or maybe meet next meeting a bit earlier. I don't think it's any like council. I don't think it's in camera, but I don't think it's all worthy of the council meeting. And then attended the flag raising for Ukraine, and that was really nice to have, and a lot of good feedback from the community. So thank you for organizing that.
Okay, thanks. I know you have to leave, so if you want to slip out now, yeah, you go right ahead. Thanks. We'll just continue
So
on
after
with.
we report, can we just go?
No.
You can
Yeah.
report yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a pretty short week at the RD. We had a water meeting. We elected a chair, which is Wendy Moore, and she just stays on from last time, and Edwin, and I believe he was the vice chair before. We did a few minor budget things there. which what they've done with the water rates at the RD is keep them really low for the last 2 years because of COVID and relief, but you're going to get hit a little bit harder next year. Clive can explain how it works, but that doesn't really affect our rate here because we charge what we want. So we can figure that one out as we go. I suggested maybe it wasn't a good idea to do a smaller rate this year because our inflation rates are going up, interest rates are going up, the economy's not getting better, it's getting worse. So maybe we should have maybe raised that up a little this year so it wasn't a big impact next time, but that didn't get much traction. So we also talked about groundwater protection with the new sewer line going in and what we would do to mitigate if there were a problem down in some of the regional areas where there's wells where the sewer conveyance line goes. And it gets pretty complex, but needless to say, I think they've got a really good policy there that will protect anyone. And I think the odds of anything happening are pretty slim. So we also talked about finding a location for a sandy dump station for RVs. I think Canadian Tire used to have one when they shut down. We don't have one in the valley anymore, so it's problematic. Also problematic is finding a location for one. Something that struck me that might be an interesting concept would be if you do get a recycling depot somewhere where you actually have to have someone buy a bigger piece of land, put a sandy dump right there, then you're not going into areas and you got to go through that same process when nobody wants it twice. This way you could put it all in one and you could actually charge for the sandy dump if you did it that way because you'd have an attendant there on duty. So, and I attended the Ukrainian flag raising as well. So that's what I did.
Dobra. I did mention to, I think when I was on the sewage commission a couple of years ago that I spoke to, was Wayne Proctor, who owns the Gas and Go on the Dyke Road, and he was in favor of the sandy dump there. So that's been sitting there with the regional district a couple of years ago that someone was interested in working with them on that. So, yeah, Councillor Swift.
Thank you. I attended the water committee, and of course, Director Grant brought up the voting structure, and they're actually going to take a look at different models because the voting structure of the water committee is done in such a way that Courtney can outvote the areas plus Comox. And it's never been a problem, but it has the potential to be a problem if there was ever anything controversial. So they're going to go back and look at some different models, and we'll see what happens. The Sewage Commission, which Director Grant or Councillor Grant has talked about, the sandy dump update, they have 3 locations that they're considering. The issue is long lineups, so they have to be able to have an area where trailers and things can line up for quite a distance. So that's part of the problem. There was a special meeting, but it was in camera, just so there's nothing to report there. I went to the flag raising. The Philberg had a wind up. The ED that has been there for the last, I believe, 12 years has moved on, and a new director started yesterday, Linda Thomas. So she looks like a real firecracker, and we might see some different actions down there. And lastly, I attended a food resilience workshop that was funded by VHA, and Director Hamir did a really good presentation at that. And that's my report.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr.
I attended an introductory meeting for the other new trustees on the library board, and it was very informative, interesting to hear their strategic objectives. I attended just this afternoon, along with the mayor, the Wounded Warriors event at 888 Wing. It was pretty inspiring to hear the stories from the various wounded warriors and runners. We had our second meeting of the Comox Valley Physician Recruitment and Retention Task Force, and there's 3 main themes we're focusing on. One are some marketing strategies, video, social media, etc., to encourage new doctors to come to the Comox Valley. Also, a red carpet welcome when they do come, how to show them various activities and clinics and things to do and entice them to stay. And then also the big barrier for many of them are housing options. So if they want to come and test out the community for a 3-month locum or see if they like the practice or like the area, helping them find a place to rent or eventually to purchase a place here in the valley. So I'll keep you updated on that. Again, Nautical Days meeting with Councilor Bissinger. Really excited to see that event come back. And yeah, the Ukrainian flag raising ceremony. So my hearts and prayers go to the Ukrainian people tonight.
Thanks, Councilor McGowan.
I also attended the sewage commission meeting, which has been wonderfully covered already. A Comox Archives and Museum Society meeting, which planning reopening and what's going on there. We've also just received a large donation from the Catholic Church in Victoria, I think, with a bunch of stuff from St. Joe's, old archives, a lot of photo albums and stuff. So that's really, really cool find. We had a Comox Valley Social Planning Society meeting. And so we'll be finding out about the second stream of funding for the poverty reduction strategy in May. And when it comes to living wage, it was really, really cool to see that we went here in the Comox Valley from 4 registered living wage employers up to 14. And that was the biggest growth in BC. Also attended a food policy council meeting with the whole, where we're talking about upcoming strategies and kind of where we're going from there. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
And Councilor Minions.
Yeah, I had a restorative justice meeting and they're just getting into their strategic planning. Referrals to kind of the RJ Center have been down during COVID, just with, they're not sure exactly why, but the police station has been kind of working on repeat offenders, which means some of the smaller to medium files aren't going through RJ. So we're doing the strategic plan on kind of how to get those referrals back up. I asked the executive director to go for lunch just to ask a bunch of questions about how that kind of whole process works. And it's a pretty great service when utilized. And in past years, they were seeing 100 to 150 kind of cases go through their center, and just the whole process with volunteers and social workers and how collaborative of approach it was really interesting. So kind of eye-opening. And community, anyone in the community can refer a file over. So of course they don't work with like domestic or families, children type things, but neighbor to neighbor disputes in our communities we can refer over. So bylaw is able to refer people if there's ever neighbor disputes that we just want to remove our municipality from. He said Cumberland does refer people every year. So something interesting is that our bylaw can also use restorative justice, which I think we pay about $11,000 a year for. And then I'm hoping to pop over to the police station with him for some of his meetings, with just getting them back involved with referring people over that don't necessarily need to go through kind of the criminal justice system. But anyone from the community can refer to the Restorative Justice Society with just a simple email or call privately. So kind of learned a lot just being the new board that I'm on there. Attended the Ukraine flag raising ceremony. So thank you for doing that, Your Worship. And it was nice to see us all there together for that, all on our minds. The coldest night of the year happened virtually, although a lot of people got out and kind of did individual walks. And there was 495 walkers this year. And their goal for Dawn to Dawn and the Transition Society was to raise 150,000. And as of today, they're at 184,000. So the community really showed up for those causes. And I know almost everybody participated in that. So thank you for that. They seem to raise more and more money every single year, which is fantastic. I got a couple calls about the Goosebet wood fire 8 rings, but I had no comment on that. And I'm excited to hear Linda Thomas is the new ED of Filbert. She's great. And I just got my membership last week. So I was going to tell everyone, I think they said the deadline was May something. It was $30 or $35. And Linda Thomas is definitely a firecracker. So that's exciting. She's 30.
She's the one from the radio station.
Yeah.
right?
Well, probably not
She's
anymore.
good. Probably not anymore.
Yes. She used to do, Tour de Rock and the radio.
Yeah.
A lot of energy.
And Councillor Minions, just to clarify, when the Justice Institute does the neighbor to neighbor, that is a free service for them, right? For the neighbor to neighbor. I know we pay in through a service with that, but I don't believe the neighbors
It's all
pay. I think
volunteer
it's-
based, so
yeah.
really there's no, you would basically have, like, I don't want to say a plaintiff and defendant, but in that way, you know, you have the
Complainant,
two sides.
respondent. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's probably the better word for it. There's no cost on any side, and he had said the Village of Cumberland actually has it in their bylaws that they will go to restorative justice as part of their
Mhm.
process. I looked through their bylaw and I could not find it,
Mhm.
but that might just have been me, but it's definitely no cost. And so, for example, things that have happened recently in the town of Comox or things that are upsetting, I've actually referred to kind of just people that came to mind, and it's,
Mhm.
you know, as a person that complains, you don't necessarily hear what the outcome is, but it's just a service in the community that unless you're sitting there talking to the executive director about it, it's just something that's not in front of mind. But he's been running it since the very beginning, 30 something years, and
Yes.
yeah, it's a really interesting tool that we have that until you're asking questions, it's just not front of mind for me.
Yeah, I think he's been there probably 15 to 20, because when I started there was somebody else.
He said 90, he started it, he said in the 90s.
We're
So
talking Bruce Curtis?
yeah, he was on the
Uh,
founding board to society to form it.
Maybe the founding board, but he hasn't been the director for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was
interesting.
Athena White who was doing it before him. But to Bruce's credit, he's really opened it up, and they deal with a lot
I
more.
wrote down 90s, but
Yeah.
my interview might have been off.
Yeah.
Very
Okay, thanks.
interesting.
Yeah, thanks. For myself, with Councillor Kerr and the CAO, the Comox Valley Family Physician meetings, and it was interesting. One of the breakout groups I was on, and the discussion was that with the rising house cost here, you know, I think soon enough, maybe Councillor Minions would correct me, but you know, what are we, 800,000, almost $1 million for a house, and for a young doctor just getting out with a whole bunch of student loan to move here, not finding a place to rent. Housing prices are even too expensive for a doctor to start with. So, you know, that's a real challenge for them. Yeah, we have a beautiful place to live, to live in, but you got to find a place to live. So, yeah, so that was good. And I guess we have another one coming up in a week or so. I attended the Steer meeting here, and they'll be happy to know. And thank you for giving that $15,000 to them. I had a meeting with ex-mayor Paul Ives. We had lunch, and it's always good just to talk things over and make sure I'm still on the right track here. I attended one of the Public Works folks' retirement, Kevin. Do you remember Kevin's last name?
Kevin Gallman.
Bowman?
Gallman. with a
Gallman.
G, yeah.
Yeah, Gallman. So I attended his retirement, and it was nice to see him off. Had a BIA discussion, not a meeting, but just some of the key players in there, and we were discussing the way forward with the BIA, what it looks like. With Councillor Kerr today, attended the Wounded Warrior, and that is a great turnout for that group. The Ukrainian flag raising the other day, and just a reminder that this Saturday, 1 p.m. Marina Park, there will be a rally. Now, the town is not putting that on. It's being put on by a couple individuals, but I think it's going to be widely attended. So if you have the opportunity to show up to that, I think they would appreciate that support for what's going on over there. So I have nothing further, and a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.